Part 1. The signal you were never supposed to ignore. There's a moment in some people's lives that is almost impossible to explain. It does not arrive like a loud event. It does not announce itself with thunder or spectacle. It begins quietly. A strange pause in your usual thinking. A subtle sense that the world around you is still moving, but something inside you is no longer moving with it in the same way. The routines are still there. The voices are still there. The responsibilities are still there. But the spell of ordinary life begins to weaken. What once felt important starts to feel strangely rehearsed. What once controlled you begins to lose its grip. And in the middle of all that, a deeper awareness starts to rise, not from outside you, from within you. Some call this intuition. Some call it spiritual awakening. And others describe it as a shift in consciousness, a phase where perception becomes less filtered by fear, pressure, and social conditioning. Here at Quantum Secrets, we're going to explore a powerful idea. What if the change so many people are feeling right now is not confusion, but recognition? What if the restlessness, the emotional distance from old patterns, the sudden hunger for silence, truth, and meaning are not signs that you are breaking down, but signs that you are beginning to see more clearly? Because for many people, the first stage of transformation does not feel like enlightenment. It feels like disruption. You stop fitting into conversations that once felt natural. You question ambitions that once defined you. You sense invisible patterns in people, media, institutions, even in your own reactions. And for a while, it can feel deeply disorienting. But this is where most people misunderstand the process. They think awakening is just about having a realization, a sudden insight, a mystical moment, a dramatic inner breakthrough. But insight is only the door. The real journey begins after the door opens. That journey is about learning how to live with expanded awareness without becoming overwhelmed by it. It is about staying clear when the world feels noisy. It is about remaining inwardly steady while outer reality keeps demanding your attention, your energy, and your identity. In many wisdom traditions, this is described as the shift from unconscious living to conscious observation. You are no longer completely absorbed in the script. You begin to notice the script itself. And once that happens, life changes in a very specific way. And you start seeing certain messages at very precise moments, a phrase, a symbol, a conversation, a feeling that arrives exactly when you need it. To some, these moments are coincidence. To others, they feel like resonance, the experience of inner awareness, meeting outer reality in a meaningful way. Whether you view that spiritually, psychologically, or energetically, the experience is real for countless people, and that is why this matters. Because once perception starts to shift, the question is no longer, what is happening to me? The deeper question becomes, what is this change asking of me? Is it asking you to become more dramatic, more detached, more convinced that you are special? No. Real expansion does not make a person inflated. It makes them more honest, more observant, more grounded, more able to feel truth without needing to force it on anyone else. That is one of the hidden signs that a genuine inner shift is taking place. You become less interested in performance and more interested in coherence, less drawn to noise and more drawn to clarity, less controlled by fear and more guided by discernment. This is where everything begins to separate. Because not every intense emotion is intuition, not every unusual thought is revelation, and not every spiritual experience leads to wisdom. That is why the next step is so important. You must learn the difference between being emotionally activated and being inwardly aligned. You must learn the difference between escaping reality and seeing through illusion. And above all, you must learn how to hold a stronger awareness without losing your center. So, in this transmission, we begin with the first essential truth. A shift in consciousness is not measured by how extraordinary your experiences feel. It is measured by how stable, clear, and honest you become. Take a slow breath, and for just a moment, bring your attention inward. Notice the space behind your thoughts. Notice the silence that exists before the next reaction. Notice that beneath the noise of the mind, there is already something still. That stillness is not empty. It is intelligent. It is observant. It is patient. And for many people, this is where the real signal begins, not in fear, not in fantasy, but in a deeper relationship with awareness itself. If you are feeling that shift, stay with me. Because in the next part, we're going deeper into why so many people are starting to feel disconnected from the old version of reality, and the subtle inner signs that this change is already underway. Part 2. Why the old reality no longer feels the same. Something changes when awareness begins to expand, not all at once, not in a way that the outside world immediately notices, but inside, the structure of your experience starts to shift. You may find yourself growing quiet in places where you used to be reactive. You may lose interest in proving yourself. You may feel unusually sensitive to environments, conversations, and hidden tension in the people around you. And perhaps the strangest part is this. The life you once worked so hard to build can begin to feel emotionally distant, as if you were standing inside it, but no longer fully inside the identity that once carried it. For many people, this stage is unsettling. They wonder if they are becoming disconnected, unmotivated, or lost. But sometimes, what feels like disconnection is actually discernment. You are not losing your mind. You are losing your automatic agreement with patterns that no longer match your deeper awareness. This is one of the most overlooked parts of inner transformation. At first, people expect awakening to feel beautiful, peaceful, liberating. And sometimes it does. But just as often, it begins by exposing what was never stable in the first place. It reveals where your choices were driven by fear, where your identity was built on approval, where your energy was tied to roles that looked meaningful from the outside but felt empty in private. That is why this phase can feel so intense. You are not only seeing more, you are seeing through more. And once that happens, old motivations can start falling away before new ones have fully formed. This creates an inner gap, a space between who you were and who you are becoming. That space can feel lonely if you do not understand it, but it is often where the deepest reorganization begins. Because transformation is not only about receiving new insight, it is also about releasing old structures, old emotional habits, old survival patterns, old ways of reading reality through tension, urgency, and control. Many people at this stage notice 3 subtle signs. First, they become more aware of energetic exhaustion. Things that once seemed normal begin to feel draining. Constant noise, forced social roles, endless comparison, emotionally chaotic environments. It is not that you suddenly cannot function. It is that your system begins to reject what it once tolerated. Second, they feel a stronger pull towards solitude, not isolation driven by pain, but intentional space, silence, reflection, a need to hear their own inner signal without interference. Third, they begin to sense that time feels different. Days move faster, old cycles repeat more visibly, lessons arrive with unusual precision, and the consequences of misalignment seem harder to ignore. Whether someone interprets this spiritually or psychologically, the effect is similar. Life starts giving clearer feedback, and that feedback can become one of your greatest teachers, because the more aware you become, the less you can betray your own inner knowing without feeling it immediately. That is why some people feel emotional turbulence during this phase, not because they are failing, but because clarity is becoming harder to escape. And this is where maturity becomes essential. A true path of awakening is not about rejecting the world or imagining that you have risen above everyone else. It is about becoming honest enough to notice where you are still ruled by fear, performance, resentment, or illusion. Real awareness is humbling. It does not whisper, you are better. It asks, are you willing to become more real? That question changes everything, because once you begin answering it sincerely, your priorities start to reorganize. You become more protective of your attention, more selective with your energy, more careful about what you consume, what you repeat, and what you allow to shape your inner state. Then you begin to understand that consciousness is influenced by rhythm, what you listen to, what you fear, what you scroll through, what you rehearse in thought, what you emotionally attach to again and again. All of it trains your inner world. And if you do not consciously shape that rhythm, the outer world will shape it for you. That is why this stage is not only mystical, it is practical. It asks real questions. What in your life strengthens your clarity? What weakens it? What leaves you grounded? What leaves you fragmented? What feels true in silence, not just convincing in emotion? These questions matter because transformation becomes stable only when insight is supported by practice. Without practice, awareness flashes and fades. With practice, it begins to anchor. So for a moment, pause here. Take one slow breath in, and then as you exhale, ask yourself quietly, what pattern in my life already feels too small for who I am becoming? Do not force an answer. Just notice what rises. Sometimes your next step does not begin with a plan. Sometimes it begins with honesty, and that honesty is powerful. Because the moment you stop clinging to what no longer fits, you create room for a different kind of intelligence to guide your life. Not panic, not pressure, not performance, clarity. In the next part, we're going into the real challenge most people never expect. Why expanded awareness can feel unstable at first, and how to stay centered while your inner world is being reorganized. Part 3. The hidden difficulty. No one warns you about. There is a stage in inner transformation that almost no one talks about honestly. It comes after the first realizations, after the emotional breakthroughs, after the moments when everything suddenly feels clear. And it is this: you begin to see more, but you do not yet know how to hold what you see. This is where many people become confused. They think that once awareness expands, peace should become permanent. They think clarity should remain constant. They think that if they have truly changed, they should never feel fear, heaviness, or inner conflict again. But that is not how real transformation works. The first moment of awakening often feels powerful because it breaks the spell. It lets you glimpse beyond old assumptions. It shows you that your mind, your habits, your emotional reactions, and even your identity are not the whole of what you are. That realization can feel liberating, but liberation is not the same as stabilization. And the distance between those two stages is where the deeper work begins. Because when perception expands faster than your nervous system can adapt, instability appears. You may have days of unusual peace, followed by periods of emotional intensity. You may feel deeply connected one moment and strangely overwhelmed the next. You may sense more truth than ever before, yet struggle to remain grounded inside ordinary life. This does not mean you are moving backward. It means your system is recalibrating. Your awareness is changing. Your sensitivity is changing. Your relationship with thought is changing. And the body often needs time to catch up with what consciousness has already begun to recognize. This is why many people experience a hidden friction during this stage. Part of them has already outgrown the old way of being. But another part still responds through habit, self-protection, and emotional memory. So even when you know better, you may still react from old programming. Even when you feel more aware, you may still get pulled into fear. Even when you sense what is true, you may still struggle to live from it consistently. That is the real challenge, not seeing the truth once, but returning to it repeatedly until it becomes your center of gravity. This is where inner strength is formed, not in dramatic moments, in repetition, in the quiet decision to come back to clarity when your emotions become loud, to come back to honesty when your identity wants to perform, to come back to stillness when the world tries to train you into urgency. That is how awareness becomes embodied. And this is why so many people mistake intensity for progress. The intensity can feel spiritual. It can feel profound. It can feel meaningful. But intensity alone does not transform you. A person can have powerful experiences and remain deeply unstable. A person can speak beautiful truths and still be ruled by fear. A person can collect spiritual language and never truly become more coherent. What changes a life is not the peak moment. It is what remains when the moment passes. Can you stay present when nothing dramatic is happening? Can you remain clear when no outer sign is confirming your path? Can you choose alignment when your old patterns are asking to be fed again? That is where real maturity begins. Because a stable inner life is not built on emotional highs. It is built on disciplined return to the breath, return to observation, return to discernment. Return to what you know is true when the noise settles. Think of it this way. A storm can move across the ocean without changing the depth beneath it. In the same way, thoughts can move, emotions can move, circumstances can move. But if your awareness learns how to root more deeply, not every wave will control you. This is the stage where many people start understanding the difference between reaction and presence. Reaction is immediate. Presence is spacious. Reaction collapses into the emotion. Presence witnesses the emotion without denying it. Reaction says, "This feeling is who I am." Presence says, "This feeling is moving through me, but it is not the whole of me." That distinction can change everything. Because once you stop merging completely with every inner state, you begin to recover your power. Or you become less easy to destabilize, less easy to manipulate, less dependent on external conditions to feel inwardly anchored. And that does not make you cold. It makes you available to truth. You can feel deeply without drowning in what you feel. You can care deeply without collapsing into every disturbance around you. You can stay open without becoming energetically scattered. That is one of the clearest signs that awareness is becoming integrated. So if this phase has felt difficult, do not mistake difficulty for failure. Sometimes difficulty is evidence that your inner world is being rebuilt on a more honest foundation. Old reactions surface because they are leaving. Hidden fears become visible because they can no longer remain unconscious. On the emotional waves intensify because your system is learning not to obey them automatically. This is not punishment. It is refinement. And refinement asks for patience. Not passive patience. Active patience. The kind that keeps practicing. The kind that keeps observing. The kind that stops demanding instant perfection and starts building real steadiness. So pause here for a moment. Take a slow breath in, and as you breathe out, ask yourself, what pulls me out of my center most often? Do not judge the answer. Just see it clearly. Because the moment you can see the pattern without pretending, you are already less trapped inside it. And in the next part, we go deeper into how to strengthen that center. How to become inwardly steady in a world that constantly pulls attention, emotion, and identity in 100 different directions. Part 4. How to build an inner center that the world cannot easily disturb. Once you realize that awakening is not just about insight, a new question appears. How do you remain steady when the world is constantly pulling at your attention? Because this is where transformation becomes real. Not when you have a beautiful realization in silence, but when you return to daily life and discover whether that clarity can actually remain with you. This is why inner stability is not passive. It is trained. Every day, your awareness is being shaped by repetition, by what you focus on, by what you react to, by what you consume emotionally, mentally, and energetically. Most people do not lose their center all at once. They lose it in fragments, a little more noise, a little more urgency, a little more comparison, on a little more emotional entanglement, a little less silence, a little less honesty, a little less space between stimulus and response. And over time, that fragmentation becomes normal. That is why one of the most important shifts on this path is learning to protect your inner atmosphere. Your inner atmosphere is the emotional and mental environment you live in all day long. It is shaped by the conversations you repeat in your mind, the media you absorb, the people you stay energetically tied to, the fears you keep rehearsing, the unresolved patterns you continue feeding with attention. If your inner atmosphere is chaotic, even powerful insights will struggle to stay alive inside you. But if your inner atmosphere becomes clear, awareness begins to stabilize more naturally. So how do you build that kind of clarity? And it begins with 3 practices. The first is observation without immediate reaction. When something disturbs you, most people move straight into identification. They become the irritation. They become the fear. They become the story. But awareness grows stronger the moment you pause before becoming the reaction. You notice the emotion. You feel the pull. But instead of instantly obeying it, you remain present long enough to see it. That pause is not small. That pause is power. Because every time you create space between what you feel and what you become, you strengthen your center. The second practice is energetic honesty. Many people say they want peace, but they keep choosing stimulation. They say they want clarity, but they keep feeding confusion. They say they want truth, but they keep performing versions of themselves that win approval. Real change begins when you become honest about what your life is actually training you to be. Is your routine training you to be calm or reactive? Is your environment training you to be clear or fragmented? Are your habits deepening your awareness or scattering it? These questions matter because your future state is being rehearsed by your present rhythm. And the third practice is conscious return. You will not remain perfectly centered every moment. No one does. You will get pulled outward. You will get triggered. You will get tired. You will fall back into old patterns at times. The difference is not whether you ever drift. The difference is how quickly you return. Return to the breath, return to silence, return to the body. Or return to what is true beneath the emotional weather passing through you. This is how stability is built, not through force, not through perfection, through repeated return. Think of your awareness like a flame. If the wind is strong and you never shield it, the flame flickers wildly. But if you learn how to protect it, feed it, and keep it steady, it begins to illuminate more than just your own inner world. It begins to affect the space around you. This is something many people sense but rarely understand. A person with a coherent inner state changes the atmosphere of a room without saying much. Their calm influences others. Their clarity reduces confusion. Their presence interrupts emotional chaos. Not because they are trying to control anyone, but because coherence has a quiet intelligence of its own. That is why your inner work matters more than you think. When you become less reactive, you stop feeding the emotional patterns that keep the world dense. When you become more honest, you stop participating in illusions that survive only through repetition. When you become more inwardly stable, you become a different kind of signal in the lives of others. And that signal is rare. It does not demand attention. It does not need to prove itself. It does not become loud to feel real. It remains steady. So take a breath with me now. Slowly in, slowly out. And ask yourself one simple question. What in my daily life keeps pulling me away from my clearest state? Do not search for the perfect answer. Notice the immediate one. Because awareness becomes practical the moment truth becomes usable. And in the next part, Horsh will go deeper into the signs that your energy is beginning to reorganize and how to recognize when you are no longer living from the old script, even if your outer life still looks the same. Part 5, the quiet signs. Your inner world is reorganizing. One of the most powerful parts of transformation is that it often becomes visible long before it becomes easy to explain. From the outside, your life may look almost the same. You still go to work, you still answer messages, you still move through ordinary routines, but internally something is no longer arranged the way it used to be. Your energy begins to respond differently. Your attention begins to choose differently. Your tolerance for what is false, forced, or misaligned becomes lower than before. And this is where many people miss what is happening. When they expect real change to look dramatic, they expect a completely new life, a new identity, a new external story. But often the earliest evidence of inner reorganization is much quieter. You stop needing constant noise. You stop chasing every invitation. You stop explaining yourself to people who are committed to misunderstanding you. You stop forcing enthusiasm for things that your deeper awareness has already outgrown. At first, these shifts can seem small, but they are not small. They are signals that your inner life is becoming more selective, more coherent, and less willing to spend energy on what weakens it. This is one of the first real signs that the old script is losing control. Not because you have escaped life, but because you are no longer unconsciously obeying every pattern life places in front of you. And you begin noticing where your energy leaks, in unnecessary conflict, in repetitive thought loops, in people who only know how to interact through drama, in environments that reward performance but quietly punish authenticity. And the more clearly you see these leaks, the harder it becomes to pretend they do not matter. This can lead to an important shift. You stop asking, "What do I need to gain?" And you begin asking, "What is draining what is already true in me?" That question changes the path, because growth is not only about adding more. Sometimes it is about removing what keeps distorting your signal, removing the habits that make you feel fragmented, removing the narratives that keep you anxious, removing the emotional contracts that require you to betray yourself in order to belong. For many people, this stage feels like becoming quieter, but it is not emptiness, it is refinement. You become more careful with your words because you feel the cost of unconscious speech. You become more aware of your attention because you see how easily it can be captured. You become more deliberate with your presence because you understand that where your attention goes, your inner state begins to follow. This is why transformation often includes a new relationship with discernment. Discernment is not fear. It is not withdrawal. It is not coldness. Discernment is the ability to feel what strengthens your clarity and what weakens it. It is knowing that not everything deserves access to your mind. Not everything deserves access to your emotions. And not everything that calls for your attention is worthy of your energy. This is a major turning point, because once discernment becomes active, you are no longer living by default. You are living by inner alignment, and alignment has consequences. Some connections fall away, some ambitions lose their shine, some goals that once motivated you begin to feel strangely empty. This can be uncomfortable, especially if your outer life has not caught up with your inner change. But do not rush to fill that gap. A lot of people panic in this stage and immediately attach themselves to a new label, a new role, a new belief system, just to avoid the discomfort of transition. But real intelligence often grows in the space before the new form appears. You do not need to manufacture certainty too soon. Sometimes your only job is to stay honest long enough for the next level of clarity to arrive. That honesty is sacred, because the more truthful you become about what no longer fits, the more life begins to reorganize around what does. Not instantly, not magically, but steadily. And one day, you realize something important. You are no longer trying to return to your old self. You are learning how to become stable in a new level of awareness. That is a very different journey. So pause here for a moment. Take a slow breath in, and as you breathe out, ask yourself, what have I already outgrown even if I have not fully admitted it yet? Let the answer come naturally, because sometimes the clearest sign of transformation is not what you are chasing. It is what you can no longer pretend is right for you. And in the next part, we'll bring everything together. The deeper purpose of this shift, why stability matters more than intensity, and how to become a clear presence in a world that is still learning how to hear its own signal. Part 6. Why stability becomes the real power. By the time a person reaches this stage, something fundamental has changed. They no longer believe that growth is only about collecting insights. They no longer mistake emotional intensity for truth. They no longer assume that every inner experience needs to be announced, explained, or turned into an identity. Instead, they begin to understand something deeper. The true measure of transformation is stability, not rigid control, not emotional numbness, not pretending to be above the human experience. Real stability is different. It is the ability to remain inwardly clear while life continues to move around you. And it is the ability to feel deeply without being ruled by every passing wave. It is the ability to stay connected to what is true, even when the outer world becomes loud, chaotic, seductive, or afraid. This is where real inner power begins to appear, because a person who is stable cannot be manipulated as easily by fear. They cannot be pulled so quickly into collective panic. They cannot be controlled by every trend, every provocation, every emotional storm moving through the environment. They still feel, they still care, they still live fully, but they are no longer available for unconscious capture in the same way. And that matters more than most people realize, because the world does not change only through information. It changes through the quality of consciousness people bring into it. A reactive mind multiplies confusion, and a fearful mind multiplies distortion. A scattered mind strengthens noise. But a coherent presence does something entirely different. It slows the momentum of chaos. It creates space for truth to be felt. It reminds others, often without words, that another way of being is possible. That is why stability is not passive, it is service. Every time you choose clarity over drama, you shift the field around you. Every time you refuse to feed fear with more fear, something changes. Every time you return to your center instead of collapsing into reaction, you become a living example of a different rhythm. This is the part many people overlook. They imagine transformation as a private journey, something personal, something isolated. But awareness is never fully isolated. The way you breathe, respond, listen, arm and hold yourself affects the emotional atmosphere around you. It affects your relationships. It affects the choices you normalize. It affects the kind of energy you bring into families, communities, conversations, and moments of uncertainty. That is why your inner work has consequences beyond you. Not because you need to save the world, not because you need to convince anyone, not because you need to become a symbol, but because coherence is contagious. And in times of confusion, a steady person becomes easier to feel than a loud one. So what does this path finally ask of you? It asks for sincerity. It asks for discipline. It asks for the courage to become inwardly honest, even when that honesty changes your life. It asks you to stop worshiping intensity and start respecting steadiness, to stop chasing peak moments and start building a clear foundation, to stop asking how extraordinary your experiences are and start asking how deeply aligned your daily life has become. Because at the end of the day, that is what remains, not the dramatic moment, not the language, not the label. What remains is the quality of your presence. Can people feel truth when you speak? Can peace survive inside you when pressure rises? Can your awareness remain clear enough to guide your choices when old patterns call you back? That is the work, and it is beautiful work. Quiet, demanding, honest, transformative. So before we close, take one final slow breath and ask yourself this: what kind of presence am I becoming? Not what kind of image, not what kind of story, what kind of presence? Sit with that. And because your future is shaped not only by what you want, but by what you repeatedly become. And if this message found you at the right moment, let it be more than inspiration. Let it become practice. Let it become discernment. Let it become steadiness. Let it become a deeper relationship with the part of you that does not need noise in order to know. If this resonated with you, write in the comments, "I choose clarity over chaos." And if you want more transmissions like this from Quantum Secrets, stay close. Because here, we are not here to impress the mind. We are here to strengthen the signal. Part 7. Closing transmission. Strengthen the signal. There comes a point on this journey when you stop asking for constant proof. You stop needing every sign to be dramatic. You stop needing every feeling to be explained. And you stop waiting for the outer world to validate what your inner world has already begun to understand. And that is when something quietly powerful happens. You become less divided between what you feel and what you know, less divided between what you say and how you live, less divided between the life you show and the truth you carry in silence. That kind of alignment changes everything. Because once a person becomes inwardly aligned, they stop leaking energy into confusion. They stop feeding false urgency. They stop building their life around noise, approval, and emotional turbulence. Instead, they begin to move differently, more consciously, more carefully, more truthfully. They listen before reacting. They observe before assuming. They protect their attention as if it matters, because it does. And maybe that is the deeper message in all of this. Not that you must become something mystical, not that you need to escape the world, not that you must label every shift in your awareness, but that you can become more real, more present in your own life, more honest with your own energy, more capable of recognizing what drains you, what distorts you, and what brings you back to center. That is where the signal grows stronger. Not in performance, in practice, not in intensity, in integrity, not in trying to appear awakened, in becoming steady enough that truth no longer has to shout inside you. So if life has felt different lately, if old identities no longer fit, if your energy has become more selective, if the noise of the world has started to feel heavier than before, maybe you are not lost. Maybe you are noticing. Maybe you are remembering that clarity has a different texture than fear, a different rhythm than distraction, a different voice than the one the world trained you to obey. And maybe this is your invitation to trust that shift, not blindly, not emotionally, but consciously, to slow down, to become honest, to refine your inner atmosphere, to strengthen your center, to let awareness become something you live, not just something you admire. Because the people who truly change their lives are rarely the loudest. They are the ones who learn how to remain clear. So as this transmission comes to a close, hold on to one thing. You do not need to control the whole world to transform your experience of it. You do not need to force certainty to walk in truth. You do not need to have all the answers to become deeply aligned with what is real. You only need the willingness to return to stillness, return to discernment, return to the deeper signal beneath fear, distraction, and old conditioning, again and again. That is how awareness matures. That is how presence deepens. That is how a new life begins, quietly but unmistakably. If this message spoke to something real in you, write in the comments. My signal grows stronger in silence. And if you are building this path with us, subscribe to Quantum Secrets. Because on this channel, we are not here to chase illusions. We are here to sharpen perception, strengthen presence, and uncover the deeper patterns hidden beneath ordinary reality. Part 8. Final Channel Signature. Before you leave this message, take one breath with full awareness, slowly in, slowly out, and notice something simple. Even now, and beneath the movement of thought, beneath the pressure of the day, beneath the old habits that still try to pull your attention outward. There's a quieter place in you, a place that does not rush, a place that does not perform, a place that does not need chaos in order to feel alive. That place has always been there. Most people never truly lose it. They only lose contact with it. They get trained into noise, into urgency, into constant reaction, into mistaking stimulation for meaning. But the deeper part of you remains, waiting, observing, steady. And every time you choose clarity over confusion, every time you choose honesty over image, every time you choose presence over pressure, you return to that place. That is the real path. Not becoming someone else, but becoming more fully aligned with what is already true beneath distortion. So if this series found you at the right time, do not let it remain only a moment of reflection. Let it become a standard, a new standard for what you allow into your mind, a new standard for what you call peace, a new standard for the energy you bring into your choices, your relationships, and your future. Because the quality of your life will always be shaped by the quality of your inner state. And the quality of your inner state is shaped by what you repeatedly return to. Return to stillness, return to discernment, return to the signal that becomes clearer when the noise fades. That is where your strength is built. That is where your vision sharpens. That is where your next life begins. If this transmission resonated with you, I'll write in the comments, I return to the signal within. And if you want more from Quantum Secrets, stay connected. Because this channel is for those who are ready to think deeper, see clearer, and live with greater inner precision. Quantum Secrets, see deeper, live clearer, protect the signal.